Welcome, Denise, to my channel. I know Denise from my ex-Jehovah's Witness program, Find Your Truth. She was in the first group that I had back in February, and her story is just fascinating. And I also worked with her sister, or her half-sister, and she just put out her own YouTube videos. So I was like, Denise, you need to be on my channel to share your story here. So
I said, okay, sounds good.
welcome, Denise, to my channel. So if you could talk us through the early days of you being a witness and maybe how you got into it, were you born in, and then walk us through until when you left, because I know that you weren't in for your whole life. So just kind of give us a rundown of all that.
So basically with the Jehovah's Witnesses, my story starts when I was about 6 years old. So that was in the early 1970s. So, knowing the Jehovah's Witness history, 1975 was when the end of the days was going to come. So here I was, 6 years old, my parents converted, and my whole life I found out was wrong, and it was bad. I couldn't be with my family. My birthdays were bad. The holidays were bad, saluting the flag. So the way that I interpreted that was that everything I had been doing was bad and wrong. And with 1975, in a couple of years, it was going to be the end of the world. I could die. And what I did believe was that there was no way to know for sure if you were going to make it into the new order. So that was a lot for a kid to, interpret. And so then, 1975 came and went. We're still here. However, that made such an impact on me that it carried through, my growing up years and into my adult years. And it wasn't something until recently that I realized how much that hold still had on me. So, going back to past 1975, I grew up, I was very dedicated to the witnesses. I went door to door, door knocking. I followed all the rules. I was one of those kids that didn't break any rules, did everything that I was told, didn't have friends outside of the JWs, didn't celebrate my birthday holidays. If somebody gave me a Christmas gift, I kind of was like, I don't even know what to do with this. This is, bad, wrong, kind of thing. My only friends growing up were Jehovah's Witnesses. And so we socialized a lot together. We were able to have get-togethers and things like that. So it was a really, really tight group. And that was my life. And, my extended family wasn't really involved in that a lot because they were not Jehovah's Witnesses and they were bad association. So there was a really strong dividing line between good and bad all the time. I gave presentations at the Kingdom Hall quite regularly. I gave talks at the assemblies, even the big assemblies that were several days. So, I had that speaking experience as well. And then, growing up in that environment, then at least I felt like things were interpreted by congregation, but my congregation interpreted certain rules or guidelines that you didn't date until you got married. And there was a big push in my congregation, or maybe the town, there was 2 congregations, but that women should try to get married earlier and possibly get out of school early. So the whole concept of going to college, having a career, waiting until you get married, there was so much pressure the other way. And I think I was 19 and I was told that I was old. I was an old lady.
I'm going to stop you right there because I would actually just like to trickle back down to when your mom married your stepdad. And I don't remember the story. Were your parents witnesses when they got together, or your mom with your stepdad? Because I know your dad left the picture when you were quite young. And
so my mom and my real father got divorced when I was a year old. My mom met my stepfather when I was around 3. And then, so it was my stepfather that basically converted the family. So I grew up with my stepfather and then my 2 half sisters.
Then
from
they
that marriage.
sure. When you were how old when were your sisters were born?
I was 3.5. So they were like 4.5, 5, 5.5. It was just right in there. They were super close in age, but there was like a 3.5 year difference between me and my first sister.
And then growing up in the congregation with two of your younger sisters in your family, a family of 5, what role did your family have as far as the witnesses? Was your stepdad a servant? Was your mom a pioneer? What was the situation like that?
He moved up in the ranks. He got as far as ministerial servant, and we were a family that followed the rules and always showed up to the meetings and was out preaching and doing what we were supposed to do, giving talks. So we weren't just behind the scenes kind of family. We were in the middle, but we never excelled to like elder whatnot. But my stepfather, he made it to the ranks of ministerial servant. What was that? You cut out.
I'm sorry. What was your relationship? What was your relationship like with your mom and your stepdad?
Well, very early, well, pretty much as soon as my stepfather came into my life around 3, he was beating me. So, and my mom didn't do anything to stop it, even though that they were just dating. And I can understand the relationship now is that he was probably beating her early on. So he had conditioned her pretty early on that, if she was to step in, that, there would be problems for her if she were to try to protect me. And so that cycle continued throughout our growing up.
And who did you talk to during that time about the situation?
Nobody outside the family. One thing with abusive families, it's all about secrets. And what is really interesting is to see that the same model that is in an abusive family also is followed very similarly with the Jehovah's Witnesses. There's a lot of secrets with the Jehovah's Witnesses. You don't go outside of that circle. And it's the same thing with these type of families. So my mom, I was my mom's confidant. She wasn't allowed to have any friends outside of our family. And I was really the only one that knew what was really going on inside our family life.
That's a lot of pressure to have on you as a kid, to have that be kept a secret. And your mom was not there to protect you during the time that your stepdad was beating you. So
right.
No one in the congregation knew that this kind of stuff was happening to you.
No,
okay.
Nobody knew anything that was going on. And as a very young kid, I mean, I didn't know any different. My mom, it had always been my mom and I to begin with. So I would try to protect her, but it basically robbed me of my entire childhood.
Yeah. So then we go back to where I cut you off initially, where you're saying where the JWs got married young, and then you got baptized at what age?
I finally conceded at 16, which was old for my group, my social group of JWs. And it was something that I felt like there was something that I couldn't put my finger on with the Jehovah's Witnesses. There was something that didn't make sense. Something, and now I understand. There's just their whole belief system and everything was off. But I just had a gut about that, and so around 16, I got baptized. Should I tell the story about my stepfather? Okay.
Yes, please.
So, so we're at a 2-day assembly and we're out of town, and my stepfather traveled with his rifles and hunting guns all the time because, you just needed that at, assemblies. That was a joke. I can be serious.
He traveled with his rifles and hunting guns in the car, being a Jehovah's Witness.
To the assemblies.
Assemblies.
Just in case you needed something. I don't know. Maybe he saw a deer, or maybe he had other plans. But so my mom.
Interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So my mom was very preoccupied with the baptism weekend and, celebratory. Yeah, so everybody knows what that's like. So when we left that afternoon on Sunday, he pulled us over on a deserted dirt road, and he told my mom to get out of the car and stand in front of the car. And he basically told her that if she didn't shape up, that he would shoot her in front of us.
Wow. And what was she doing that she needed to shape up?
She probably was preoccupied with her daughter, and he was jealous.
Wow.
So I understand now that if he killed her, he would have to shoot us because we were the witnesses, which I think is an interesting connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And that was your baptism weekend?
I'm pretty sure that was the weekend I got baptized.
Okay.
So my whole life was about living with this constant threat of, we didn't know what my stepfather was going to do, and he had deteriorated mentally, in terms of what his fantasies became and what he wanted to do and what his threats are. But I honestly think that his mental capacity was, he kind of got his jollies from the threats. And then if he had killed us, then his fun would be over. So I kind of feel, and it's very twisted, but I kind of feel that's how bad it was with him. So I graduated high school, and I started working full time because I needed to get the hell out of my house. It was just absolutely crazy. It was very dangerous. It was not safe. So bottom line, I got disfellowshipped for conduct that shouldn't be a Jehovah's Witness. So I told my mom about it, and she said that she was going to take me to the elders. So I said, don't worry about it, I'll do it myself. And I was disappointed because I felt like she would protect me, but she didn't under the circumstances. So I got disfellowshipped. And during that time, there were 3 elders in the room, and I had been with a man, is what the situation was. And they interrogated me, and and these were elders I had known all my life, but I felt like I had been violated, and I felt like I'd been raped, the questions that they asked. They wanted to know very specifics. How did it start? What did you do? And at that time, I was so conditioned that I didn't just get up and walk away. I should have just gotten up and walked away, but I didn't.
How old were you at this point?
That would have been 21. No, I'm sorry. That would have been right after high school. So I was probably 18, 19, something around there.
And you knew you were getting disfellowshipped?
Yeah, what they asked me that was going to base whether or not they disfellowshipped me is, do I felt repentant? And I said no, because I don't feel like I'm any different.
Okay.
So why does it really matter? Mm-hmm. And I still don't feel like I did anything that would just completely upset my life, that I was such a bad person. Mm-hmm. So they disfellowshipped me. They said that if I wanted to get back, that it would take me a long time, because nobody gets back in a short period of time, in a couple months. My mom told me that I either had to move out because I was living at home, or I had to, get back in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I couldn't afford to move out. So I went back in. I was at every single meeting. The shunning was very intense. People I'd grown up with, I'd see them in the grocery store, and they would stop and then turn around the other way and run like I had leprosy. So that was just, that was a really hard period of my life. And in 6 months, I got reinstated. I guess that's fast. I don't know. So I get reinstated. And when they made the announcement, they told the congregation not to clap.
What?
They told, because this is just the beginning. And so they announced my name, and the congregation wouldn't stop clapping. So what I really remember about that night is that when you get cut off and you're shunned and you're treated like you are dirt, and then all of a sudden in 30 seconds, you can be let back into the group and everybody is so welcoming. It kind of doesn't make sense, to go from one extreme to the other, but I had to prove myself. I still was not out of the woods. So I moved in, long story short, I couldn't wait to move out. I moved out of my house in with a pioneer, and they warned her about me. And I'll just put it this way. She eventually left the JWs a couple of years later. So I found out that not all Jehovah's Witnesses were following the rules quite the way that I thought they had to be followed. So that was interesting. So when I wasn't living at home, so in between these years, I'm living with the pioneer. So just kind of during that period of time, I went and visited my mom. And at this time, my stepfather had moved out. Now, to get to the point for him to move out was a huge ordeal, and especially because you don't get divorced or anything, you know, in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So that was a pretty big thing that he moved out. And I can't remember what all the circumstances were. Probably I was just trying to stay out of it because I had my fill of all their stuff. But I went over there and she had been completely beat up. Her face was black and blue. Just her entire face. And then she showed me her bedroom, and he had taken a sledgehammer or something and just crushed everything that he could and smashed everything. And everything she owned were just these little pellets in the carpet. Just everything had been destroyed.
What was the
He
trigger?
had gone on a rampage.
What was the trigger?
Because she didn't talk to him, but he didn't even live there.
Wow.
Was he over there?
Wow.
So I told her, I said, you need to go to the elders. You need to go to the elders right now. And she said, I can't. It doesn't make a difference. And I know she has said that before to me in my life, but most of my life I was so checked out. And for some reason it clicked this time, but she said, and maybe I think because I had been out of the house, so I had distance between all this violence and chaos and abuse. But she said, it doesn't help to go to the elders, because when I've gone to them in the past, they told me I need to go home, be a better wife so I don't get beat.
Wow.
And hearing that in that perspective, based on everything we had experienced, I realized my entire life was a lie. The elders knew, and I found out since then that they know about more things that happened, and they turned their back. They never did the right thing. They never got the authorities involved. And everything that I protected and I stood up for, they hadn't done any of that. So it was shortly thereafter that I asked to be disassociated. And when the elder had called me to try to talk me into staying, I said, I don't want anything to do with this. And I was disassociated. So that was 21. This was before social media. So there's no platform to connect with anybody. I was literally on my own. So everybody I knew that I grew up with, that was my support system, my family, didn't exist anymore. My mom and my sister shunned me.
And so you were reinstated for a very long time.
Between 19 and 21.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But it was enough time to, be graduated college, in the working world, had moved out on my own. And I probably was the first time in my life that I actually had peace, because I didn't have all this chaos to go home to. I really started to see that there was such a difference, and so when she told me that, it just, everything collided. Like I cannot, it was against my values and my gut to be part of this organization that did this. And it wasn't just me. I mean, who else was this happening to? And my mom did share that she knew of other brothers that were beating their wives. So something that was well accepted. Mm-hmm. And clearly promoted, and that was the thing with my stepfather, is that he became a bigger and bigger monster because there was nothing to stop him. He knew nobody would stop him. And then as his drinking got worse and worse, he just, he spiraled out of control with a lot of stuff he did. So when I left, I had no plan. And like I said, I was a rule follower. I did everything by the book. So I never did something spontaneous, and this completely changed my life. So I didn't really have a backup plan how I was going to live my life. So I didn't have friends with worldly people. So I really felt like I was walking around with no clothes on. I felt so exposed. Didn't know who I can trust. Didn't know who my friends were. So it was a very, very dark period of time in my early 20s. Very, very depressed. And it was just amazing how much people need people, to be in their lives, to have that touch. It's so important for, humans. So just, I think I would say between that time and, like the 30 years after that, I kind of was in, kind of checked out a lot, but that was a lot from my abusive upbringing, kind of that being conditioned for that. Things were really,
Disassociation.
what was that?
Disassociation from yourself. Because I think when we first started talking back in early February, it was very much you were talking about how you were constantly disassociating, where you were in a space, but then you didn't realize you were in a space and you were kind of like, disassociating.
Right. And I think people could understand it if something bad were to happen, let's say a car accident, and then they're shocked. Something happens where they're not present in terms of what's going on. So it was just that's kind of how I lived my life. But I was still struggling, and I always knew that I was meant for greater things than what I was doing. So so in the meantime, when I was 21, my real father got in touch with me. And that was an interesting reunion because I didn't look like I didn't physically look like the family I grew up with. They were very different and than I looked, but I was a spitting image of my stepfather, my real father. And then when he picked me up at the airport, he said, "So tell me what's been going on for your whole life." I mean, where do I start? And it was just like,
where do you start? Wow.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So if anybody's looking for their biological parent and you do meet them, just expect any emotion will come out. Just roll with it. So it was very emotional. And then when I was started to visit them, they were celebrating the holidays. And I mean, talk about that shutdown, disassociated experience. And I understand, I'll come back to that in a minute, but the celebrating birthdays and the holidays. And then my brothers and sisters had a very safe, secure life. They owned a home. Like, we never knew if we were going to get kicked out because we didn't pay the rent. That was very interesting. It was very bittersweet, a lot of positives with it, but there was a lot of things that, it showed what I didn't have growing up. So I did go to college. And I bring that up because it took me over 10 years to go and get my degree. So I was in my early 30s when I got my degree, but it was physically excruciating to go. I felt like I was always going to throw up, going to class, studying, doing everything. So I waited till last minute to finish my projects and the whole thing. And I understand now that was the hold that the Jehovah's Witnesses had on me, even up to 30 years later. And my same reaction when I celebrating the holidays and stuff with my dad, was my reaction was from when I was 6, and I thought I could die if I'm celebrating participating in these things. So when my mom passed away, so my mom and my sisters had left the JWs years and years ago, and then she and my stepfather got divorced, and then he eventually passed away. So when my mom passed away a little over 5 years ago, it was an interesting turning point for me, because I finally was able to acknowledge what I had missed out on life and her role in that. And I had always been her protector and very loyal, and I still love her. very deeply, but I got screwed over, and my sisters did too. So coming to that realization, there was a lot of depression that year, and it was just really interesting because I felt like I was drowning in sludge at some point, or I felt like I was just in this big, heavy winter coat, like I shared with you before, and I'm in the Arctic or Siberia somewhere, and it's cold, and I don't know where to go, and, kind of thing, and just feeling so trapped. And so what I started to do at the end of that year was I started going to Adult Children of Alcoholics meetings, which is based on the ACA or AA meetings. So people get together that have had abusive upbringings, and especially when there's been drinking involved, and then they try to support each other and, tell their stories. And I realized now I was reliving all that trauma. And so that was a whole other layer of unresolved issues that came from my upbringing in the Jehovah's Witnesses. So, and I wasn't at a point where I really understood that at that time. And so from there, just kind of a sequence of events, I came in contact with a trauma therapist. And it was the first time after all my researching for the right therapist, somebody actually gave me information and explained what was actually happening to me and why it happened, and walked me through, because to confront something that is going on, but you don't understand it, and you have these reactions that you've had before from when you were so terrified, and then you're reliving it again. It's very scary to go through that process. So that was my first step in understanding the trauma that had happened and undoing it. And I was diagnosed with complex trauma, which is something that happens before the age of 5, and it's repetitive over years and years and years. But it was the first time that I could start to understand what was happening in my body and why I disassociated. And she eventually, and what I also learned a lot was I started doing research on trauma. So I actually had some academic understanding of it, which nobody had brought up to me before. And then eventually she started to bring up the hold that the Jehovah's Witnesses had had. And for probably a year and a half, I pushed back on her because I thought that was the most stupidest thing she could bring up to me. I left them, I walked away, I know what it's all about. So what could be the problem, kind of thing. Well, come to find out, she had been working with exjw. She had been working with other religious cults that they had left that had similar hold on, her, on her patients. So, and then she had also been in a religious organization, different denomination, Christian based, but had that same kind of control. So, which I think is interesting that, it can happen in other areas. And so in January, for whatever reason of this year in 2022, I became more curious about Jehovah's Witness, ex-Jehovah's Witness.
And remind me, before we get into that, your therapy that you did, was it talk therapy? Because I know you also did EMDR.
It was EMDR, but before I could even do EMDR, we had to do a lot of talking and prep work with DBT.
Okay.
So that my body could actually handle talking about the trauma. And EMDR is not so much talking about it, but it's highlighting some events and then how your body responds to it. And you're using a tapping method or back and forth with the eyes as you're mentioning these things. So that's kind of how it works. Okay. But it took me a good year before I could even do my first EMDR session.
Wow.
What was that?
You were doing the therapy for about 3 years.
Yes.
Total, okay. So that
Yes.
brings us to the beginning of 2022.
So that brings us to 2022. So she's still encouraging me to look into groups, because I kept saying I just felt like I'm an oddball, kind of an alien, like nobody gets me. And so she says, well, why don't you check out on the internet and see, what groups are out there, and, that kind of thing. And I'm like, that's just ridiculous. So for some reason, I don't know why, but the beginning of this year, I started poking around, and it was interesting because it was kind of like, I'm just going to do like one eye open.
Because I'm like the
know.
person that I had this group. I'm like the devil over here.
Right. So, and I was amazed. I came across some, YouTube videos of people that had actually given their, a personal interview of themselves. And they were telling my story, and they weren't bashing any particular people. They were just telling their story. And so there were some groups that it didn't resonate with me, because I want to know what the answers are. How can we grow from this, kind of thing? How can we move forward? And then I came across some other groups that one group, it was the exjw critical thinkers with CC.
Yep.
They have all the rules on their website. And I'm like, I am still following these rules.
Hi. Oh, wow.
Oh my God. Even to my birthday and I've been out of the JWs for 30 some years, and I'm still following it. I'm like, that's where it's all coming from.
No.
And I'm like, it's in black and white. So I was just like, holy shit. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Are you kidding? And so that was when I'm like, all right, there's something else. So your name, and you kept popping up. So you were kind of in the same space as I was. And then just randomly, I picked my phone up, and you had done a video, and you were talking about this workshop that you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I checked you more out on your pages and everything. And then I reached out to you. And so that's kind of how we met. So that was the beginning of February. And I'm like, you know what? Let's check it out, and let's see where it goes.
Yeah. And it was literally like a message from the universe saying, like, it's your time to step into the Jehovah's Witness space as a coach. You need to put the program together. I put the program together, and every single week I arrived with you guys. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing right now, but I feel called to do this. And I had a topic that we talked about each week, and then you guys answered the questions, and it was like so awesome seeing the connection that you guys had together, and then the unraveling of all the trauma, and to be understood and heard, and just work through it in a space where you felt safe has just been so inspiring for me to be able to witness people being that in the 8 weeks. It's such a short amount of time. People are getting the help that they need with a therapist that might have taken 3 years, because you're in a space where you don't have to explain the vocabulary of being a witness. We get it. We get it. We were in the same.
Absolutely. You walked in the same shoes.
Yeah,
exactly. So, having that experience, I just felt like it was a safe place, and it was an opportunity to expose. I would say that was really my experience. And I think everybody's a little bit different that would be working with you. But for me, it's like I exposed all this shit that I was holding on to and didn't even know it. And from there, I mean, and just some other stuff that I've worked on, and we've worked even after the 8 weeks. I just feel like I have space. I feel like I finally cut out the 10-pound tumor.
That sounds about right. The heavy coat that you've been carrying all your life.
Unbelievable. And the one thing that you've done with me, which was really helpful to me, was that the compassionate
inquiry. Compassion.
That, and people I think need to be ready for it.
Absolutely.
But that was extremely helpful, because you're really getting into like the core of what's going on, and then it just feels like it's just released.
Because your body is constantly reacting to
Yes.
your emotions and your triggers, and you don't even know it. And especially like somebody like you who's constantly disassociating, you're not even like in tune with what's going on from the neck down. You're all in your head. Then the
Yeah.
anxiety is really high. Your chest can get really tight, and you don't want to stay with the tightness in your chest because it's scary. So then you just stay busy, and you're really good at that. So I had challenged you so many times to stay with the discomfort and see what happens, and it's just been absolutely incredible. So how are you doing? I mean, that was February. We worked together for 4 weeks, and like you said, we have talked a couple times between now and then. Between the beginning of February when you reached out to me and now it's almost July, how do you feel like you've changed as a person in this short amount of time?
I feel that I have options, and I'm realizing that when I start to get into a certain like stuck place, that I can kind of figure out where it's coming from and look at it different in terms of, I don't have to be held down by that. And also there's just a lot of shit that is just like kind of been released, which helps, and you cracked me up when I was talking to you. It was one of the last times, and I said, the universe doesn't talk to me, and then I started telling you about stuff. You go, excuse me, and like I didn't even see it. So it's like, well, maybe the universe has been talking to me this whole time, and I didn't know.
I think that some people think that you're literally gonna get like money under your pillow, like the tooth fairy is just gonna like come and do
or a letter in the mail, or whatever.
something crazy. But that's not how it works. It's usually subtle things, and most people are so caught up in their day-to-day life that they don't realize these subtle things. It's when you actually take a look at what's going on in your life that's like, okay, you released that video on YouTube, you got thousands of views within less than a week. If that was an answer from the universe to say, hey, this is something that you need to pursue a little bit more. And then all the other things that have been happening to you, it was like, absolutely, this is your path if you choose to take it. So the universe is constantly saying you should go in this direction, here's your direction, but it's up to you then to take those steps. And sometimes it's scary, but sometimes it's like the universe thinks you're ready, but are you ready? And I think this
clearly I had no idea. They were raining down on me. So and then like you had mentioned, I had made a video about my story back in January, and I was really nervous about that. And I wasn't able to load it up on YouTube for months. And then I was finally able to load it up 6 months later. And I was so pleased with the interest and the stories that people have shared with me on the comments. I had no idea. I thought you would look at it, maybe my sister. So, and you're the one that told me, go ahead, Jen, have you seen how many views there are? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
I don't even know. And I'm like, you have like a bazillion comments, and you're like, how do I look at the comments? I don't even know how to look at those.
So yeah. So it just shows the need and the interest. So my goal is just to say, hey, this is what happened to me, and you can still move past this and move on. And there's hard work to be done, but it can be done this way too. Because like I never knew what to do. I never knew how to do this. And I really think after my mom passed away, and I felt like I didn't have to be responsible for anymore, I had that space to do that.
I love that. You've done so much too. And I always say that healing is not a linear path. I know that you're really into self-help books and all that stuff, but you've also done traditional therapy, EMDR. We've worked together, and you're a health nut just like me. So there's no like one way. It's not just therapy. You have to experiment and just really figure out what is right for you, and whatever is right for you may not be right for the other person. And it's not just one thing. You really have to like get curious, and the road to healing is never ending. It's not like,
nope, it will not. Nope,
now
it will not
be like fully healed. The light is gonna open up.
Heavens open up. Yeah. No.
It's
No.
not how it works.
But you know, if you look at it, you know, people through their life, they reinvent themselves and they change. So it's kind of along those lines. And we just have, you know, a little bit extra stuff to work with, a little extra spice.
Absolutely. So
So
now here you are. I know you're married with 2 kids. How long have you been married to your husband?
20 years.
Wow.
And so I have a stepson who just graduated college, and then I have a college kid, and then one that is going to be heading into college, all boys.
What do they think of your JW background? Your boys?
You know,
Husband?
they don't understand it because we have not raised them in any religious affiliation. So it's something that doesn't kind of make sense.
Mm.
And I think I probably did that on purpose because it's like, okay, you know, one religion equals all,
Yep.
you know, kind of thing. But we've never talked about them not having the ability to, but we've never exposed them to that. And I'm okay if they kind of figure it out along the lines. But they know enough about it that, you know, they're kind of sounds weird, you know. But I made sure that they had a very different life than I ever did in different opportunities.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now 30 plus years out of the organization, it's finally time to have your own time right now, which I feel like you're doing such a great job at that, and you're constantly evolving and changing. Is there anything that you want to add to this video that we haven't gone over, that you want to have a message for somebody, or anything you want to say in general to wrap this up?
I would just encourage people that if they have had an experience with the Jehovah's Witness, and some people that have left comments for me on my video, is they also have family or friends that have, so they kind of know firsthand. But it's something I just encourage everybody to look on social media on some of the ex-Jehovah's Witness platforms, and, you know, just kind of be part of that group and that support group, to understand that this isn't a one-time thing. This is a lot of people have experienced that, and being open to that, you may be able to learn something. It may solidify your experience, and just give you strength to either let go or move on. And I think having that connection, I think, is very, very important, so that it's not that you have to feel like you're on an island, or that you're bad, or that your whole, people have shared that they were raised Jehovah's Witness, or they got out just 5 years ago. It doesn't have to end just because you just left.
That's
You still have,
That's when it begins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to celebrate the holidays.
Exactly.
You don't have to.
Exactly.
Maybe you don't want to do that. You know, create the life that you want. And if something is blocking you, then figure out how to blow it out and get rid of all that crap. It doesn't have to feel heavy, and yeah, there's so much more to, you know, enjoy in life, no matter how long you were associated with them.
Absolutely. That's a very good suggestion too. You don't have to celebrate the holidays if you don't want to, because I know you were having a hard time around birthdays, and people think just because you left the organization, all of a sudden you have to celebrate all the holidays and make it, you have to actually double everything, because you
Right. Make up for
it. You miss out on decades of birthdays, Christmas, whatever. Now you have to like load up on everything. It's like, that's not how it works. If you don't feel for celebrating birthdays, don't do it, or Christmas or whatever. So yeah, make up your own rules. That's my logic. Make up your own rules. It's your life. You deserve to be happy. Figure it out as you go along. So thank you so much, Denise. It's been,
you are so welcome,
a real pleasure. I appreciate your honesty in this interview, and I will link your video in the description box for anyone who'd want to see it.
I would love that.
Gonna be people that are going to want to see that. So I'm going to end the video right now.